Good morning, everyone. Get that out of the way before I blast you out of the room. 4th of July, what a day. How many of you even mentioned independence from England yesterday? There's a few. There's a few. I thought about it. I didn't have anybody to talk to about it, but I thought about it. Independence is a very important thing. Marty was eloquent in his use of that this morning. I appreciate that. The idea that we were set free, it's important. The warning to not go back and be enslaved all over again is really, really important. And I want to quote from, Marty quoted from Paul, and I want to quote from Paul too. But this time I'm not going to quote from the Apostle Paul, I'm going to quote from Paul Harvey. Those of you who remember Paul Harvey, you got to be a little in the aged department. Either that or you like to do reruns and things, but Paul Harvey was quite a commentator. And back in 1964, he wrote something for a newspaper, an article for the paper, and it was entitled, "If I Were the Devil." And then he did it on radio a year later in 1965, and I want to read Paul's comments this morning, and then I'm going to do my own, "If I Were the Devil." I separated them so I wouldn't contaminate Paul's his rendition of this, because it was a masterpiece. So, let's listen to Paul Harvey as best I can do, Paul Harvey.
You gotta speak in a deep voice.
I thought I was. If I don't get much deeper than that, dear. Oh, okay, yeah. For those of you who would like to follow along in spite of my voice, okay, we'll do this. Is it up there? All right. If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I would want to engulf the whole world in darkness. I'd have 2/3 of the real estate and 4/5 of its population. But I wouldn't be satisfied until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I would set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of the serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, "Do as you please." To the young I would whisper, "The Bible is a myth." I would convince them that man created God and not the other way around. I confided what's bad is good, and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, "Our Father who art in Washington." And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature more exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirty movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I would soon have families at war with themselves until each in its turn was consumed. and with promises of higher ratings, and I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but to neglect the discipline of emotions and just let those run wild. Until before you know it, you'd have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography so I could evict God from the courthouse and then from the schoolhouse and then from the houses of Congress. In his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion, and I'd deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbols of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I would take from those who have and give to those who want until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what do you bet? I could get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I'd caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism and morality. I'd convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public and lure you into bed with diseases for which there are no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. Paul Harvey says, "Good day." It was first aired on the radio in 1965, and it came from his newspaper column in 1964. Almost seems prophetic, doesn't it? What a loss to the world and to journalism and all fair people minded everywhere in the world. But here's the thing. Truth will always be, or almost always be, prophetic. Because it's always right. I didn't want to mix Paul's articles with my thoughts, so here's my little addition to this. I don't know what's going on here with this thing, but thank you for notifying me. We'll try and get it back. If I were the devil, I'd make virtual the reality. And I'd make reality unreal. And I'd numb the senses of those addicted to video games, and I'd make death and life merely a click apart. If I were the devil, I'd use every tragedy as an opportunity to pit people against one another and to gain more control over their lives. We've seen that, right? I think we're experiencing that a bit right now. I would teach every child of every generation to hate and who to hate for what may have been done to faceless ancestors of mine in the past. If I were the devil, I'd convince them that it's ridiculous to forgive and even try to forget. Man, what has been done to me in person. You know, I think about that a lot. We have a Savior who was willing to forgive what was done to him. The past had nothing to do with it. We need to understand how to be like God. That is, from now on. We have an amazing God who takes our lives from this moment, like we were talking about this morning, like Marty brought up, that we have been made free from our past sins. We need to make other people free from the past. No matter what, no matter what that Jesus person said, after all, you know, look what had got him. If I were the devil, I would convince them that nature is to be worshipped rather than the creator of that nature. If I were the devil, I would convince the world that there is no truth, that everything is relative. You know, the world has been working in that direction for the last 100 years. Relativism is not a new thing. We're growing to new levels, new heights of relativism, and I'm amazed at our society that we can even work together in any way. I'm amazed that engineers can still understand that 2 and 2 is 4. That accountants can read a ledger and add it up at the bottom because it seems like truth is like gas that can't be grasped. If I were the devil, I'd encourage the idle to use any excuse to lose their senses in mob mentality and have them don masks of obscurity and loot a neighbor's business or home. You can smile and shake his hand tomorrow. He won't know. If I were the devil, I'd tell them to ignore Solomon's words in Proverbs. After all, he didn't always follow his own advice. In Proverbs chapter 24, verses 11 and 12, it says, "Deliver those who are being taken away to death and those who are staggering to slaughter. Oh, hold them back." If I were the devil, here's what I'd say. See what I mean? He's actually telling you to stand in harm's way. How dumb is that? Don't get involved. If I were the devil, I'd say that. But Solomon continues. If you say, "See, we did not know this. I didn't know." Does he not consider it who weighs the hearts? And does he not know it who keeps your soul? And will he not render to man according to his work? I think about all of the injustices that take place in our world, in our country, in the big cities, and not always in the big cities. And people who witness those things, but who are reticent, they're scared. I don't know, is it cowardice or what that causes people to not stand and do something about it? Don't we know there is a watcher? That we are being watched, and I can't say I didn't know if I did. There might be a policeman, there might be a judge who will accept that, but there is the judge who will not. The devil says, don't pay attention to that last part. If I were the devil, I wouldn't want you to know that if you are involved in or just acquiescing to these kind of things, you are already mine. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 and 2 says this. You were dead. We were made free, right? But what we came from, that slavery that we came from, he says, you were dead in your trespasses and sins, in which you formerly walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. My sons, my daughters, says the devil. 1 John wrote a lot of things that were different. He wrote more about how to love and how not to, and what it is and what it isn't. Paul's the only one that comes close, but John just seemed to be centered in that thought of how or what it means to love. He also talked about what it meant to be a child of God. So in 1 John chapter 3, 9 and 10, here's what John said. He said, no one who is born of God practices sin, because his seed abides in him and he cannot sin. That's hard to understand, because I'm thinking that his seed abides in me, and it's still a struggle to not sin. But what he's talking about is that every thought that is in our heart comes from a seed. The seed is either from God or it's from that prince of darkness, that spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. That's where it sprouts. He says his seed abides in him and he cannot sin because he is born of God. When the Apostle Paul was writing in the book of Ephesians, and I want to switch here, and I want to turn over to the book of Ephesians, because I want to read this. I wasn't going to do that, but I want to change my mind. In chapter 4, verse 17, start in verse 17, and I want to read it so I don't mess it up. So this I say, and affirm together with the Lord, that you walk no longer just as the Gentiles also walk, in the futility of their mind. It all starts in the mind. That's where the seed is planted. Whether the seed is from God or whether the seed is from the prince of the power of the air, it begins as a seed. He says, being darkened in their understanding, because excluded from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart. You know, there's a bunch of different reasons why we can be ignorant. One is that we can just never have heard it, never seen it, never experienced it. Or it can be because we don't care, because we don't want to know, because we have no interest in. So I am absolutely, totally devoid of knowledge of figure skating. I kind of like to watch it sometimes for very short periods of time, but it's not something I'm ever going to be an expert at. It's not something I'm ever not going to be ignorant in. I don't know what a sow cow is. I heard that one time, but I have no idea what that means. I don't know what a triple lux is, but I heard it. I don't care to know what that means. I'm ignorant. But it's not because, well, I guess it is because of the hardness of my heart. But this you don't know because you've never heard it, or you don't want to know it. He says, and they, having become callous, have given themselves over to sensuality for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness. But here's my point. You did not learn Christ in that way. If you're a sinner, you didn't learn it from Jesus. You didn't get it from God. As a matter of fact, everything in this book is teaching us how not to be that. The book of myth, have it your way. But this book is one of the only places you can find what's good for you in every respect. Not only in this life, but in the future life. You did not learn Christ in that way. By this, the children of God and the children of the devil are obvious. That's what Paul's talking about. There is the sons of disobedience, and they are following their father. He says, by this you children of God and the children of the devil are obvious, and anyone who does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor the one who does not love his brother. Wow. Wow. Notice how he ends that? That being the Son of God is tied to loving your brother. You know, Jesus was asked a question in derision one time. And just who is my neighbor? I think we all know the answer to that. My neighbor is the person, and I've got to tell you something here. My conscience has been bothering me for 3 days. Because 3 days ago I was traveling down the highway and I saw someone on the side of the road waving their hand. And I passed them by. It's been bothering me ever since. They're not there anymore. Weren't there a short time later. Seems like opportunities to show who we are and what we're all about are like vapor. It disappears. Don't waste the opportunities to do the right thing. They may never come again. I want us to end with a thought that is found in one of the Bible readings that we have, where Paul says this in chapter 6 of Ephesians, beginning in verse 10. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His might. Put on the full armor of God so that you may be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly. Hard to imagine that there's evil in the heavenly. But that's where the devil is in the spiritual world. But he has tentacles in this one. What we're suffering in our nation right now, we can all take a little bit of the blame for, because we're not vocal enough to stop things before they get out of hand. I admired Paul Harvey. I'm sorry he's gone, because he had words of wisdom every day. But we don't have to have Paul Harvey. We have God's Word available to us every moment of every day. And I am so thankful to Julie for showing me something. I was so dependent on commentary, on lexicons and concordances. And I had to get the wording exactly right And she showed me how to just get close to it with Google, and it will tell you every place. If you're not using Google to find Bible passages that you don't know, shame on you. You're ignorant because of the hardness. No, wait a minute. Let's back up here. You don't have to be ignorant. That's the thing. Thank you. I appreciate that. This lesson, it's been different. I understand. But if we have anyone in the audience this morning that knows your life's not right with God, that you are jeopardizing your freedom, come back. Come back as we stand to sing the song that Seth has for us. Won't you come?